Soldier, he or she is paid to keep upright, scanning the horizon for the enemy, identify and engage the target. It's extremely difficult to do that if I'm doing this. It's even more difficult to do it if I'm doing this, with a helmet, with night vision optics on my head. Oh, by the way, I'm carrying a weapon system completely kitted out that's probably about 13 pounds. I'm probably carrying about 85 pounds of combat load on me. And oh, by the way, my job is to identify and engage the enemy. So our human performance team comes in and says, okay, how do we adjust this? What I want to be able to do is explain to you what we do at what's affectionately known as the Natick Labs, but is really the U.S. Army Natick Soldier Research, Development, and Engineering Center, or the NSRDEC. There are 7 of them across the Army. We are responsible for everything the soldier wears, carries, consumes, safely lands to the ground under, or lives in. It's all done in the jewel of the Metro West Crown, out in Natick, just off the Mass Pike. And there is our facility. So actually JFK was there when we laid the cornerstone in '54. Our campus is approximately 75 to 78 acres. It depends on what day of the week it is. And then specifically for us is we are chartered for doing all that research and science technology for the soldiers. So let me start off by saying this is an information brief. This is not a solicitation brief. I am a government servant. I am not a contractor. I work for the Army. Uncle Sugar pays my salary on the 15th and the 30th of every month. I'm not out here trying to hawk wares. I'm not trying to solicit your wares. What I want to do is make you aware of what it is that we're doing. So in that, a little background on me. I'm a former captain out of the Army. 10 years prior service. My last duty assignment was as a captain in the 75th Ranger Regiment, and unfortunately I had a terrible jump injury that broke my back and broke my pelvis and ended my military career. That being said, while I was recovering from that, I started interfacing with Natick because the Natick Labs were doing a new body armor program. And when they asked me what I was going to do after being a Ranger, I went, there's something you can do other than be a snake eater? I have no idea. What do you guys got up there above the Mason-Dixon line? Because I'm kind of a southerner. And why don't you come up and see what we have in the middle of winter with 4.5 feet of snow on the ground and the Mass Pike, or the Big Dig in full effect back in '99. To come up and see that. So essentially, I got hired on as an equipment specialist, to bring real-world experience because I've had assignments in light, mechanized, special operations, and airborne units to bring that kind of vantage point to the engineering side of the house. I also have 2 college degrees, so I speak a little bit better than a traditional infantryman. Not much better, but a little bit better. And my degrees are from the University of Georgia, so no Roll Tide jokes while we're in here. So specifically, when we're talking about what we do, we reach from what's traditionally the Beaker and Bunsen burner laboratory all the way up to interfacing with our customer, and our customer is a soldier in the field. As I had mentioned earlier, we have product teams that go out into theater to solicit feedback from soldiers based on the equipment that we fielded, actually in the combat space, and we routinely bring soldiers back to the Natick Labs to get feedback. As I had mentioned earlier, our design turn are anywhere between 18 to 36 months because the battle space is that dynamic. Depending on the environment that the soldier's in, the rules of engagement, wear and tear on the platform, and the platform being anything that's on the soldier, how do we get that back from the individual? To give you an idea, we are literally Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. The other government agencies that we work with, for example, the tube food that's used by the U-2 pilots is created small batch at Natick for every U-2 mission. Most people don't know we have that facility or that capability. When it comes to DoD, every food item for the Department of Defense, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, submariners, as well as shipboard, all that work is done at the Natick Labs. When we talk about the individual soldier, pretty much all you do is take the weapon off the platform, and we call the soldier a platform. You will hear me say this a million times during my presentation. The soldier is a platform, the soldier is a platform, the soldier is a platform. The reason why 7 surgeries, broken back, broken pelvis is, well, partly genetics, and partly because the platform broke down. So how do we address this soft, fleshy platform? So we reach out to all those agencies as well. One of the other things that people don't understand is that's the breadth and width of our workforce. You're looking at approximately 900 individuals on the facility on any given day, a little less on snow days, a little less on nice New England days. But that's what you're looking at, the breadth and width of what we have inside the facility. And of that, when we talk about that 700 to 900 personnel, at any given moment, there are probably only about 40 to 45 uniformed members on the facility. And a large portion of them are our human test subjects. Because how are you going to test equipment if you don't put it on soldiers? But the rest of us are all researchers. We're all government civilians. Predominantly, we're all government civilians or contract personnel working on the facility. We're all civilians. We come in and we do our job every day. So even though we are the only active duty Army installation left in New England, we are predominantly fueled by civilian personnel. So when we talk about the soldier and what's most important, we have the breakdown of what we call our domains. Our basic and early applied research, airdrop and air delivery, that I will talk about, clothing and individual equipment, human systems integration, expeditionary basing. We have what's called soldier and small combat unit tech maturation and demonstration. So imagine, if you will, the soldier is a shoe, and I change the shoe laces. I have to build the entire shoe in order to test it to make sure it works. That's the soldier. So before I put a new widget, a new piece of body armor, integrate a new piece of electronic on the individual, I have to create the environment that the soldier is going to put it in, and I have to test it. Historically, that was easier to do pre-9/11 because we were a traditionally peacetime Army. Post-9/11, it is extremely difficult for us to get our hands on soldiers because they're either downrange or they're home recovering. So we have these small unit events in order to do fits, tech demos, maturation decisions as we have equipment that comes in, and it's kind of our lifeblood when it comes to developing items for the soldier. And then again, joint service combat feeding. Inside the fence, we affectionately call it, biotech, nanotech, we have an Institute for Polymer Technology, and then we have a whole modeling and analysis team. One of the biggest pieces for us in the transition post 9/11 is the importance of modeling and analysis because once again, it's very difficult to get out to use soldiers. So as much as I can do models of, performance, wear, cognitive load, and we'll talk about cognitive load, especially those of us that came out of the Ranger Regiment that may not have a whole lot of cognitive ability. How you affect that soldier over time, how you deal with the platform, huge for us. And one of the things that we've done inside the Natick Labs is transition into what we call the Soldier Performance Facility, in that on top of everything that we design, there's a payment to be made on the individual that's wearing it, mentally and physically. And how do we address that? And we'll talk about some of that in a second. When we talk about our human systems integration, anthropometry, biometrics, our behavioral and cognitive sciences, to the point where we literally go in and look at what the interior of the colors of our shelters should be like in order to promote health and welfare and happiness and better work environment. People kind of laugh at that. Is there anybody that's been a soldier in here by any chance? Oh, yes. So can I get hands back up for just a second? Okay, we got young and old, yes. So, general purpose mediums, everybody is aware of them. The GP medium, the traditional tent shelter we always used, dark, dank, canvas, black, lit with artificial lighting. Took all you could do to stay awake inside of it, much less deal with the smell of it, much less even get any work done in it. So as we're transitioning, and oh, by the way, it took a long time to put up. And it was made out of steel and wood in a combat environment where there's lightning and rain. So as we transition to new polymer materials, how do we have a more effective shelter that actually promotes work? It's something that we've done that's new and emerging when we look at the entire environment that the soldier operates in. And then, once again, modeling and analysis and the soldier and small unit performance. So, when you talk about a soldier under load, on average, that soldier will exhibit what we like to call the infantryman's lean. You'll notice that soldier is wearing about 75 to 80 pounds of load on his back. You'll notice we have a mocap studio in-house in the labs, and then when I put the human skeleton over it, you'll see, yes, how the individual is actually compensating for that load. Okay, why is that important? We talk about video games and mocap and all that stuff. Soldier, he or she is paid to keep upright, scanning the horizon for the enemy, identify and engage the target. It's extremely difficult to do that if I'm doing this. It's even more difficult to do it if I'm doing this, with a helmet, with night vision optics on my head. Oh, by the way, I'm carrying a weapon system completely kitted out that's probably about 13 pounds. I'm probably carrying about 85 pounds of combat load on me. And oh, by the way, my job is to identify and engage the enemy. So our human performance team comes in and says, okay, how do we adjust this? And I talked about it earlier, and I appreciate everybody that just peppered me with a flurry of questions to start because you got my brain moving. Combat load study done in 2001 in Afghanistan within the first 6 months of the ground war. Standard infantryman soldier. And I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence, but an infantryman, does everybody know what an infantryman is? Yes, no? That is your standard soldier. Call him a door kicker, whatever you want to do. That is a soldier on the ground responsible for closing with and destroying the enemy in short distance. That soldier was carrying in excess of 125 pounds of external load. Or as we affectionately called it, the Backstreet Boy effect, because you were carrying a Backstreet Boy on your back the entire time you were fighting. Okay, now I came out of the Ranger Regiment, and as a captain leader inside the Ranger Regiment, my rucksack alone weighed 100 pounds. And it weighed 100 pounds because I was carrying 3 different types of radios that allowed me to talk on 3 different frequencies to 3 different assets, and that was just the radios. Oh, by the way, you're talking about a 72-hour mission profile. If batteries last 24 hours, that means I need a minimum of 3. If any of us have ever trusted a battery for 24 hours, none of us do, I'm carrying 2 to 3 times that. So you're talking about a battery load of upwards of 10 to 12 pounds. Batteries, running electronics. We're not talking about weapon systems, we're talking about batteries running electronics. When you talk about the weapon system, 12 to 14 pounds for an M4, basic load is 240 to 300 pounds of 300 rounds of ammunition. Perfect time for a Coke break. So what you have is, you're now not only uploading the soldier, but now let's talk about up-armoring. Soldier carries a minimum of 2 ballistic ceramic panels, front and rear. These are our new pieces of body armor. This is what's housed inside this carriage shell. The soldier in Afghanistan and Iraq are carrying 4 of these plates, by the way. 2 large, 1 front, 1 rear, 2 small, side each side. This plate will stop multi-strike 7.62 machine gun. And when I say multi-strike, I can't tell you exactly how many, but probably somewhere on the order of 3 to 11. These plates weigh approximately 4.5 pounds apiece. So you're talking 9 pounds. I went to the University of Georgia. We did addition there. Half that amount of weight for the sides, but you're talking about the ability to withstand essentially walking into machine gun fire. Now, I as an infantryman go, that's approximately about 14 pounds I can carry. Happily. I won't eat today to make sure I have that capability. Now, granted, as we're continuing to move, these plates started out at 8.5 pounds. They've come down to 6. Now they're down to about 4.5 pounds. And the science and technology is constantly changing to give greater capability. But as somebody mentioned earlier today, how do we know it works? There's a great, terrible explanation. Wounded Warrior is a great explanation as to how good the body armor works. I have soldiers withstanding blast and withstanding machine gun fire that 30 years ago would have killed them, that now is only maiming them. And the reason why is I'm protecting the thoracic cavity and the head. And I'd like to think that you guys know that certainly, but the reason why is this is where all the important stuff is. And oh, by the way, when you're taught to engage a target, this is what, I mentioned this earlier, everybody likes movies, everybody likes video games. Nobody shoots anybody in the head. Nobody shoots anybody's hand. You shoot for the largest target, which is this part. So if I can protect this part, we can replace your arms and I can replace your, well, we as a whole can replace your arms, can replace your legs, but when you start talking internal organs, it's a whole nother animal. And now we're actually working with the NFL for concussion protocols. How is our next generation body armor and helmet working with TBI exposure, because you're talking about blast inside vehicles. So originally when the body armor was designed, we were talking about a direct action threat. This is me, this is you, I shoot you, you shoot me. That's how we started. That's how we started before Afghanistan kicked off. And then when the few months of Afghanistan, it wasn't the direct fire fight, it was, we're going to blow up your vehicles while you're inside of them. Well, our vehicles were never designed to withstand blast, because no one was going to blow up our vehicles. Who blows up vehicles? And nobody was going to get blown up inside vehicles, because infantrymen don't sit inside vehicles. We shoot bad guys up close and personal, but we got to ride a vehicle to get there. So how do we make that design turn in order to make the body armor work better, perform better in the environment? So the other problem that we have is all this integrated electronics capability for the soldier. There has been a huge change in the dismounted soldier inside the Army. When I came in the Army, back in 1986. We were worried about the Great Russian Hordes. That's what, I mean, I'm 43. I can say that. The Great Red Threat is what we were worried about back then. Electronics integrated on the battle space, unheard of. Electronics were a bad thing. Soldier no like electronics, soldier break electronics. Or electronics break on soldier. And if you have no confidence in your item, this isn't Nike. I can't blow out a shoe and go to a store and replace a store. If I have a piece of night vision that doesn't work, you could potentially kill somebody. So we completely stayed away from the integration of electronics. And then the 90s came, and my Gen Xers and my Gen Yers came on board. And they grew up with Ataris, and PlayStations, and Xboxes, and video games, and cell phones. And they all went, why is it that I can have a phone and I can talk to anybody in the world? Granted, back in the early 90s it cost $1 billion. But I could talk to anybody in the world, and I can't do that in my soldier equipment. Where's my electronics? Where's my capability? How do I talk to somebody that's outside of my eyesight line, which up until the early 90s, we didn't do that. It was literally walk to the next guy in the squad and say, this is where we're going. Now we have the integration of technology. Now we have the ability that technology is performing well enough that we're not worried about mean time failures. So now it's a matter of technology's there, period. How do we optimize it? Well, right now we're cabling everything. For a number of reasons. One is, it's easy. I'll be honest. The other is we have security protocols. When you talk wireless, anything that's wireless on the body, that means potentially you can hack it. If you can hack anything that's on my body, it potentially means you can see what I'm looking at. I do not want you to see what I'm looking at. The other piece is how do we do that effectively? You know, you're talking about a group of soldiers. If we talk a squad, for example, those are 9 men. By the way, men is a generic term. It applies to both males and females. It has no relation to the battle space. It's just what we say. Sorry, I have to say that because people get offended when I say men. You know, how do I look at this capability? Because a soldier is carrying a smartphone. He is carrying a radio. He is carrying night vision. There is a display. How do we transition from what was the original LI-145, which most everyone who sees this in the room will go, oh my God, that's a big battery. This is actually half the size of its predecessor. This is the LA-145, the BA-5590s we were talking about that was post-Vietnam, post-Cold War, and the AMPRC-77, which was twice the size and weighed 5.5 pounds apiece, and actually had a mission life of about 16 hours. The LI-145 is what we have, what we started with, and then we moved to conformal batteries and distributing them across the body. How do I tie in multiple electronics? By the way, I can shoot this, I can stab this, I still get transfer data rate. I can use it as a slave, I can use it as a backup. Because when you talk about something that's this form factor, the soldier's supposed to get on his or her belly in order to shoot, move, and communicate. You put 4 of these across here, there is no getting on your belly. There is no getting your face in the dirt. You've now altered how the individual soldier fights. So how do we streamline and move those how do we move those electronics efficiently across the body, and how do we give that soldier next generation capability? So the soldier on my left, your left, or whatever, it should be all of our lefts. Yeah, left. Left. That's the soldier that we have today. That soldier's walking around on the ground right now in Afghanistan. That is what that soldier load looks like. That's what that soldier is carrying. And most people go, oh my God, he's carrying so much stuff. I affectionately say that the combat soldier dismounted right now in Afghanistan, and potentially in Syria, is an F-16 on legs. That's the platform. The soldier's carrying a weapon system that can reach out upwards of 600 meters. The soldier's carrying a radio. We always, since we talk about financing and stuff in here, I know you guys talk about OPM, other people's money. We believe in OPB, other people's bullets. I don't want to get so close to you that I engage you. I want to have somebody with a really big hammer destroy you from farther away and just let me look through my binoculars and go, man, it's a bad day on the ranch for those kids. That radio allows me to reach out to use assets that are slaved out to us. That radio allows me to reach out in real time and touch other members of my squad. As I'd mentioned earlier, now we're talking about glass vehicles for command and control. We used to talk about glass cockpits for aircraft. Glass vehicles for Net Warrior, you're talking about an individual soldier that's walking around with a GPS puck. Part of the Blue Force tracking, I can look at a 2-dimensional display and I can see that entire unit moving in real time in my command and control vehicle. Doesn't matter what time of day it is, doesn't matter where we are in the world. 2 great things about that. One is reduction in fratricide, and the other is command and control for weapons platforms. So as you can imagine, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're in the mountains of Afghanistan and you come upon a bad guy and your commander goes, "Where are you?" The individual soldier goes, "Do you want me to look at a map right now? I'm kind of shooting a bad guy. How about you do that?" So we have the capability now to see that in real time, and that's the kind of technology that you're seeing come out, that type of connectivity, that type of network-centric warfare. So while we may not, and actually we do work on batteries, but while we may not work on some of the onboard electronics, you don't get to be on my soldier unless you come to the Natick Labs and justify what it is, what the capability is, and how you get it on the soldier. So we are the master integrator for all those things for the dismounted soldier. So when you look at some of the options that, or some of the issues that we have, for us, hardware, software agnostic, huge piece for us, because we're plugging and playing and we're changing all the time. When we talk about the DoD software package, what that means is helicopters, aviators, potentially naval gunfire, all those networks that everybody talks on, I need to be able to reach out and talk to them in real time. So I don't need to carry a radio for each type of asset. I have one radio or one piece of electronics that lets me talk to everybody. When we talk about the capability, we're always in the trade-off of the capability versus load and what that wears like. So I use this example all the time. 10 years in the Army, I had 8 surgeries before I left. Torn rotator cuff, both shoulders, lateral medial meniscus, right knee, ACL, right knee, lateral medial meniscus, left knee, PCL, left knee, broken right ankle 4 times, broken left ankle 3 times, broken back, broken pelvis. First off, bad genetics, I blame my parents. Secondly, we're talking about carrying 120 pounds under all this load and all this capability. We're constantly looking at reducing the soldier. If you look, and where's my World War II buff at? I know you're in here somewhere. We had a conversation earlier about, there you are, the World War, when we're talking about, oh, the World War II guys, the World War II guys were carrying nothing. They were carrying like a 30-pound bedroll on their back. They were, I mean, granted, they drowned, especially when they assaulted Omaha. But when you talk about overall load, be this kid, backspace, be that kid, and you fall on your back and you look like a big turtle. And there's a reason why soldiers don't fall on their back and look like a big turtle, because everybody else makes fun of you. So if you're going to fall down, you're going to face plant. Broken nose 3 times. At least I'm going to look like a cool kid if I'm going to get busted up. So the trade-off of how that works. Now in conjunction to that, when you talk about ballistics and protection, and we talk about next generation body armor, the threat is always changing. So when we talk about the ballistic threat, for example, we went from a direct action, people shooting you, to blast, to now different grades of military armaments that are used inside the battle space. How can we stop them? How do we make a design change? How do we address those? And people tell me all the time, can you protect a soldier from head to toe? I absolutely can. I can do it today. Sadly, that individual is going to look like the Michelin Man. And it's really easy to shoot that soldier that walks around the battle space like this. So there's always the trade-off. Minimal protection for thoracic cavity and head, still engage the weapon system, still engage the enemy target, shoot, move, and communicate. That's what soldiers get paid to do, shoot, move, and communicate. If I impact those things, I've taken away from the soldier's capability. So, you know, you talk about, and I'm not going to pass this one around because this is a live one, and if you break it, I'll be sad. But I will pass the non-ballistic one that's weighted correctly, and this is actually the next gen at 4.5 pounds. So this protection front and rear gives you the ability, and we have actually, as I like to say all the time, there's no better way to anger an American infantryman than shoot him. Because there are a ton of examples that we have that soldiers, A, didn't know they were shot wearing the next generation ballistic body armor, or B, knew they were shot because they saw the puffs on their load carriage equipment, and that just makes them really, really angry. How dare you shoot me? It's time for me to shoot you and everybody that's around you. For that type of capability. And we're looking at next generation body armor protection that will give greater head, greater body, but once again, the trade-off is always, you know, could I protect the head from 7.62 or greater? I absolutely could. The argument is the round's traveling so great that if you strike the head's probably going to whip back and probably break the neck anyway. So your head and face will look gorgeous, but it's not going to do you any good with a broken neck. So how are we constantly trading that off all the time? And how do we monitor those effects? When it comes to contingency basing, most people are kind of familiar with what's known as a FOB, a forward operating base. It's those really nice looking structures that you see on the news. People are walking around with an M4 slung on their back and a soft cap, cement ground, they're eating at McDonald's and Burger King and stuff. That's not how 90% of the Army functions. Most of them are in forward operating bases or small fire bases that require next generation materials. So we use inflatable shelters, for example. Rigid wall inflatable shelters that I can actually roll out on a paddle or roll out on a pallet or kick out of an aircraft, and I actually inflate them. They're ballistically rugged. I can have them erected with 3 to 4 men as opposed to 15 or 20. My folks that have ever put up a GP medium or GP large, that was an all-day affair. I can put up an entire shelter now that can support a company. I can put that entire set of shelters up in about 4 hours. A company's about 120 to 175 personnel. We can use mortar ballistic panels on the interior. We can actually ruggedize that platform. So say, for example, I walk into the desert in Afghanistan and we decide that's going to be my fire base. How do I get stuff there? Because we're in the middle of nowhere. I can't bring in vehicle traffic and haul in all these tents and all these shelters because vehicle traffic convoys get attacked. By the way, I say this all the time because most people don't know. You guys always hear about convoys being attacked in theater. Convoys, 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 convoys. Convoys are doing one of 2 or 3 things. One is they're taking water into a supply area for soldiers. So they're water trucks. Or they're taking refuse out, i.e. trash. Or they're taking expendable materials out. So we literally have what's essentially our trash trains or what's getting blown up when you talk about vehicle ambushes, because that's what we're having to do in remote areas like this. So now we have next generation contingency basing. We're looking at leveraging power from sun, power from wind, water from exhaust, usage of black water, gray water. How can we make them standalone, sustainable microgrid systems so I can be out in the middle of Afghanistan without support and I can be self-sufficient? Because as you can imagine, there's not a lot of potable water in the middle of the desert in Afghanistan. Well, not even in Ramadi for that example, for that purpose. In conjunction with that is what we have what's called aerial drop and aerial delivery. So the individual parachutes that you see folks come down in, the new T-11s, for example, the cool cone-shaped parachutes that you may or may not see, based on a little design from Da Vinci in 385, I think, replaced our traditional rounds. That's what's out in theater right now. We also have something known as JPADS, or on-demand airdrop. JPADS is the Joint Precision Airdrop System. I'm inside of an aircraft. I'm a loadmaster. I'm flying above AGL for being concerned about being engaged on the ground by enemy fire. Ramp on the aircraft drops down. I kick the bundle. Kicking is an old term. The bundle slides out of the back of the aircraft. Inside of it is a GPS system, onboard computer system, onboard activators. I'm on the ground with a smartphone-like device that says, hey, airdrop capability, this is you, this is me, fly to me. The load itself flies down to the individual soldier plus or minus, right now it's 6 to 12 meters. I wanted to hear wow. I desperately wanted to hear wow. So when you talk about the change in technology and capabilities, aircraft, really big. Any Air Force folks in here, by any chance? Air Force? Okay, I don't mean to offend you. Those aircraft are really big. They cost a lot of money. People don't like seeing those blown out of the air. Soldiers? Aircraft? No, we don't like to see those things get shot. So when you talk about pushing bundles of resupply, that traditionally is a rotary wing aircraft job. Rotary wing, helicopter, thin-skinned. Good sidearm and a shot, I can shoot almost everybody inside the aircraft. I fly large-scale aircraft, 141, C5, C-17s. Loadmaster has bundles that are tailored for where they're going to go. And when we talk about bundles, I mean, I have bundles that are half the size of this room, upwards of 25,000 pounds, that the loadmaster goes, onboard computer, you're running? Bundle says, yep, I'm running. Push him out, and the aircraft continues to fly away, and he's pushing more bundles. I'm on the ground in the middle of Afghanistan on a mountaintop that I couldn't get to with that resupply, and I'm sitting on the ground with a GPS puck or a GPS locator, and the bundle is flying real time to me, i.e. onboard computers pulling toggle switches, actually using risers, and it's flying itself to me. That's pretty cool. That was designed at the U.S. Army Natick Soldier Research Development and Engineering Center, right down the Mass Pike in the jeweled Metro West Crown. So it's really kind of cool when you see about that. Most people don't even know that we have that capability. Traditionally, parachutes have been dumb. You put something on it, you push it out of an airplane, it lands. Airborne Rangers. You put something on it, you push it out of an airplane, they land. But when you talk about resupply, huge piece. I'm reducing vehicle traffic. I'm getting just-in-time, what we call JIT, just-in-time resupply. So I literally can say, I'm running low on water. I need water. Got it. I got a C5 that's in your AO, area of operation, excuse me. In the next 10 to 15 hours, we'll push water to you in the next 10 to 15 hours. Or ammunition, or whatever the case may be for the unit that's on the ground. New and emerging technologies that are there. And then combat feeding. So who's familiar with the MRE? Whether you're a soldier or not, whether you camp, whatever you may do, you're familiar with the MRE, the meal ready to eat. It's been called the meal refusing to exit. It has a number of names. As a matter of fact, if you go to our social media site, but I may or may not be the social media manager for the NSRDEC, you'll see that we're doing a study where you'll eat MREs for 21 days and be sampled on how it affects the body and how it affects your internal workings. 40-mile radius of Natick, once again, Natick Soldier Research Development and Engineering Center, right down the Mass Pike and the jewel of the Metro West Crown. But our food, amazingly enough, and people don't really understand it, is so important to the dismounted soldier or the soldier in general. If it isn't good and doesn't taste good, a soldier doesn't eat it. If the soldier doesn't eat it, I'm not fueling the soldier. If I'm not fueling the soldier's in an environment and they're burning calories, I'm going to make that soldier more susceptible to injury, to illness. I'm going to reduce cognitive function. There are all these things that are going to impact the soldier. So the MRE, for example, I believe we're at 26 menu items total. That 26 itemed menu changes about every 18 to 24 months. And that's because we filled the new item. Soldiers come back and go, I really love eggs with ham, or I really hate eggs with ham. And enough people say they hate it, it comes out of the menu and something else goes in. One of the new things that we just started that we're going to start fielding is MRE pizza. And listen to that sound. Most people go, pizza. A soldier goes, pizza. So as you can imagine, so let's talk about our rations, for example. Plus 120 degrees, minus 40 degrees, 3-year shelf life. Has to be as good on the end of the 3rd year as it was on the first day of the 1st year. Pizza, messy. Sauce, pepperoni, bread. It's practically a miracle that we designed MRE pizza. Designed by the Combat Feeding Directorate down at the U.S. Army Natick Soldier Research Development and Engineering Center right down the Mass Pike in the jewel of the Metro West Crown. But when you talk about that, soldiers are driven by food. Napoleon said, an army marches on its stomach. Okay, when you talk about the soldier, and we all have, sorry, I don't mean to assume. Most of us have problems with our weight. I said we, I'm a fat kid. Where you do or don't eat something for whatever reason, and you realize fatigue, you realize that you're tired, whatever the case may be. The soldier doesn't have that capability. A recent study in 2000, I think it was either 2004 or 2005, found that a soldier in Afghanistan, in the summer of Afghanistan, was burning somewhere on the order of about 9,500 to 10,000 calories a day. I love talking to smart folks. That's a behemoth amount of calories. I mean, when you talk, look, I'm an Ironman athlete. It's a challenge for me to get 4,500 to 5,000 calories in my face a day. And I go on a 20-mile run, and the last thing I want to do is eat. Go pull an 8-hour mission cycle in 100-plus degree temp, and the last thing you want to do is eat. So how do you change the design of the food? How do you concentrate the calories? How do you have the balance of what's fat, protein, and carbohydrate? We are now looking at 3D printing for out in that individual patrol base that says, okay, if I can't get you food and I can't get you MREs, I can create a slurry. I know some people will be like, slurry. But I can create a food product or a slurry that I can tailor. So for example, if you're in that hot environment, I can build a gruel or oatmeal type meal that will give you somewhere on the order of 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 calories that you can eat and you don't have, you know, when we talk about 10,000 calories, I mean a traditional food of what we eat, that's half this table's worth of food. You sit down, unless you're really hungry or it's been a really long night. I don't know if there's any MIT students in here. Unless it's been a really long night. Oh, you guys are probably too smart to even do that. At the University of Georgia, if it was a really long night, it would be a challenge to consume that much food. How do you do that? How do you make it palatable? How do you make it easily digestible? How do you not have gastrointestinal distress? How do you adjust for the soldier that's coming in? We are now seeing soldiers with lycopene allergies, which means tomato skin and tomatoes. We have a higher concentration of lactose intolerant soldiers. We have a higher group of the population that's gluten-free. We have vegetarians in the Army. We have vegetarian MREs in the Army. We have religious preference in the Army. We have religious preference MREs in the Army. So my Jewish soldiers, my Muslim soldiers can eat in accordance when they're in the field. That's a huge change from 20 years ago. I mean, when I came in the Army, it was like, you're a vegetarian? Yeah, you can be that when you get out of the Army. There's no option around that. The Combat Feeding Directorate has a team of dietitians, and when I say team, I'm talking 14, that's sitting around and crunching this data all the time. And our soldiers are smarter. Our soldiers, we actually developed a web app through a hackathon where our soldier has the ability to look at the MRE that's there, type it in and go, everything inside the MRE provides me this many calories per menu item, this much fat, this much protein, this much carbohydrate. Which gets more buy-in from the soldier wants to eat, the soldier wants to consume, you get better understanding of the product. I'll be the first one to say it. When I got handed the MRE in 1986, that brown bag box with the 5 fingers of death, if anybody remembers that, with hot dogs, and I just went, yeah, I got to eat it. Doesn't matter, I have to consume it, whether you like it or not. The fact of it being palatable, never on the table before. Now, by the way, we're talking shipboard food, long-term food, our T-rations food. We have MRE heaters in every one of our MREs that allows you to actually heat up any of the meals in the MRE family so you can have a warm meal. Amazingly enough, most people don't understand how important that is. It's extremely important to have warm food, especially in cold environments. Anybody who's been in Hohenfels, Germany, middle of winter, really nice. The other piece is in the energy expenditure to do that. So now we have standalone systems because when people talk about field feeding, we have MKT, mobile kitchen trailers. Well, I can't put an MKT fired up with propane, sit out in the middle of Afghanistan and serve hot chow all day. I can't get soldiers there, but I can cargo and packetize rations that have the ability to heat themselves to get out there. Sadly, we haven't broken the widget on good hot field coffee, but we're working on that. And I will say, because a lot of people always ask, are those little tiny Tabasco bottles that are in MREs? Those are gone. For soldiers who know those, we're all very sad that they're gone. And there may or may not be, if you go to our social media feeds, there may or may not be a sheet that you can sign to try to get those back. I may or may not have started that. So some of the unique facilities that we have that most people aren't familiar with. One of certainly that I want to highlight is the Dorio climatic chambers. I can go back to the picture of our entire campus as well. One side of Dorio can go plus 120 degrees. The other side of Dorio goes negative 40 degrees. I can generate any climate anywhere in the world in either side of those chambers, to include wind, rain, moisture, snow. We actually can truck in sand for heat and heat resonance, as well as light. Kind of a cool thing. We also have the Willette thermal test facility, because we also do burn testing, because when you talk about soldiers and they're operating in and around equipment, normally the test for fire resistant is 120 degrees at 5, I think it's 120 degrees at 5 seconds for flash. So we have the ability to test on site. Our cognitive performance lab, 3D laser scanning lab. One interesting thing about our 3D laser scanning lab is the fact that the soldiers have changed over time. We're bigger as in stature in comparison to soldiers in the past, and some of them are a little bit bigger in girth because Americans have gotten a little bit bigger in girth. So when you talk about size tariffs, and I love to use this all the time because men don't understand it, but women do. If you go to one store and you grab a size 8, you go to another store and grab a size 8. If you go to one store and grab a size 4, go to another store and grab a size 4, they don't fit the same. Size tariffs are completely different. Now build uniforms for a 1 million manned army. Extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. Size tariffs have to be representative of what the force is. So when I came in the Army in 1986, I was a medium regular. I'm now a small regular in the Army. Smallish. I might have gotten a little heavier since I got out. We have what's known as the Base Camp Integration Lab out at Fort Devens. We have on the top side to you is the science and technology, or excuse me, the existing shelter environment that's in theater right now. And below is all the new emerging science and technology that we're developing for shelters and for basing. So a soldier comes in and says, the top is what I'm going to cover down on in theater. The bottom is as we come up with a new widget, whether it's gray water, whether it's wind turbines, whatever, we build it in the lower half of the facility and show soldiers how we can integrate it, and they take it out and test it for us. So it's a living test space for us. The other piece that I wanted to say was the collaborations we have with academia. So you may or may not know we have UMass Lowell. We have our Heroes group out at UMass Lowell. The Soldier Institute for Nanotechnology is here on the MIT campus. We are very lucky in that if you live inside Massachusetts or New England, we have the ability to reach out to a number of organizations, whether they be small businesses, whether they be academia, that we try to partner with and leverage all the time. So I very much appreciate the fact that you guys didn't ask any questions while I was going through, because I expected to just get peppered the entire time. However, I've kept you for about 45, 47 minutes. I wanted to provide you an information overview, and this is a very top-level explanation of some of the things that we do. Hopefully, well, twofold. One is it's an unclassified environment, and I can't talk about a lot of stuff. Secondly, I hope that it can kind of give you an idea of what we do, and potentially you know of new and emerging technologies, new capabilities, practices, procedures that we could potentially apply. As bad as I hate to say this, I brought a stack of business cards. You can feel free to reach out to me in order to explain all those, and I'll put you in touch with our Small Business Initiative group. But other than that, this concludes my portion of the brief for the jewel of the Metro West Crown, the Natick Soldier Research Development and Engineering Center. So pending your questions, if you don't have any, I will run away smartly. But if you do, I have the rest of the evening to answer them, because this is your tax dollars hard at work, so it's not like I'm going to quit and go home. Sir? Best Inventions of the Year was Female Body Armor by Time Magazine. When we talk about the design of body armor pre-integration of females into combat roles, and I try to mention this all the time, when I talked about the convoys earlier, predominantly, do you know who's driving the trucks that are those convoys? Females. They're 88 mics. So I have female convoy drivers driving combat environments to come resupply me, the combat armed soldier, in the same environment I'm in, so we have to give them the same kind of protection. What we were doing with our body armor and load carriage system is we were making extra small versions of our anthropometric data for body armor. Female soldiers were literally wearing holes in their hips because the body armor doesn't work correctly. Female torso shorter. They're wearing improperly built, not improperly sized body armor, and they are altering themselves biomechanically, and they're hurting themselves biomechanically. So about 3 years ago, we had an initiative to completely redesign the body armor for females. The other problem that we have is the disparity between men and women in bust size. So for the body armor to work correctly, the body armor has to sit up and against, I apologize if I'm messing up your microphone, up and against the body in order to have this firm part to work. If you're a big busted female and you tip the body armor this way, you're actually defeating the way the body armor works. How do we have the body armor work in correct space? So we worked to completely redesign the body armor, and now we have female-specific body armor and male-specific body armor. Just so happens, it works even better now, and now we're going to have more numbers and larger numbers because we're seeing an integration of females in the combat environment. I will say this, I'm a former combat armed soldier. I've dealt with females my entire time. I'm trying to think right now of the female lieutenant that just got killed, who there was a book about her, and for some reason her name is escaping me. She was actually assigned to 75th Ranger Regiment guys. She was with infantrymen, combat infantrymen, doing the same job with them to support them. They are coming. We need to be able to support them as best as we can. The biggest piece for us is the change in body armor and how we address it. Well, we're starting to see some of that. And the great point you make is of high priority. I'm really more concerned about that body armor performing effectively over that 10-day mission profile while I'm walking around there, as opposed to potentially batteries getting hot. We do have mil spec that all of our equipment is built to as we integrate onto the Soldier, and as we have issues, for example, there were battery fires with the early land warriors, for example, of how that works, where the failures were, how do we address that, and how do we adjust that. And that's why I say platform. It's a difference of how we're looking at the Soldier as a platform now. It used to be, I get a battery and I go, this battery's good for, plus 120 degrees, minus 40 degrees, it's good for 10 days, go wear it. Okay, it is. Well, now that integrated on the Soldier, what impact does that have on the Soldier, and what are we looking at long-term use? We're starting to look at that as the integrated platform. And you'll certainly remember this, the Soldier as a system is kind of one of those hallmarks that we've had all the time, but we're only now really starting to look at the Soldier as a system. That's why I lovingly jest my Air Force brethren, I lovingly jest my Navy guys. The level of detail in creating the entire system is a different piece than you have with an infantryman soldier or with a dismounted soldier. That soldier is given a bag of stuff that has X capabilities, and they integrate that onto the body to perform their job effectively. We build an F-16 aircraft, and we go through a selection process to find the guy or gal that's going to sit in the F-16 aircraft. It's a different modality, it's a different approach. But we're learning and we're trying to get better. It's the reason why the biomech team is here. It's the reason why the consumer report team is here, to try to see those kind of things and get that kind of feedback. And believe it or not, as bad as I hate to say that, it's 2016? Yeah, 2016. That's new and novel. It is, just because of the way things are built. When you talk about trauma, what we're doing in real time is the medical command is providing us that data. So every type of trauma that happens in the battle space, everything from a broken toe to TBI to blast overpressure to gunshot, all that data gets collected and shared with us. Co-located with us at the NSRDEC is called the U.S. Area Research Institute for Environmental Medicine, which are the doc side of us, that allows us, to see some of that data. We base our protection on that threat. The difference is it's a little different for us because we have to address that threat and potentially next-gen threats at the same time. So when I mentioned earlier, when we talk about a million-man army, I would love to be able to buy a piece of body armor that works today for today's threat and buy a new piece of body armor that works tomorrow for tomorrow's threat. And if any of you guys win that $1.3 billion lottery, I would love for you to write a check to the U.S. Army Natick Soldier Research Development Engineering Center because we could do it that way. But until then, we're looking at a wide range of what we can do. We know that blast will never go away because it's been exposed in the battlefield. Everybody's a copycat. It's easy, it's cheap, it's always going to be there. Direct threat, direct action threat will always be there as well. So what we need to be able to do is temper blast and temper ballistics. Ballistics change incrementally, normally, so it's easy to adjust and scale. Blast is kind of more of a superfluous thing because, when you're talking about 420 millimeter shells that are daisy chained that blow up, that's a World War II aircraft bomb compared to what we used to do in the past. So I don't want to say live and die because that's almost a literal thing, but we live and die by the data that the medical side of the house provides us. So as things, for example, when we talk about extending body armor out to the extremities, as the body armor becomes lighter and gives that same level of protection, we will go out to the extremities. Right now, we can't make the trade-off of weight, cost, and protection for the dismounted soldier. I hope that makes sense. Oh, yes. University of Georgia cat, old, talking to a young Georgia Tech cat. It's a miracle, sir.
Where are the real challenges for which technology could provide a solution for which the tech community here could start thinking about?
I'm just going to spitball. Please don't anybody write this down. I'm not soliciting contracts. I'm not saying this is the next gen thing. I'm just going to throw some things that are out there. We've already talked about wirelessly connecting everything on the body. Cables are great. Cables give me great data transfer. Cables have weight. Cables get snagged. It's the reason why when you see a soldier like this soldier son of a... let me try to go back and do the soldier that's standing there. Most people won't realize, and it's because soldiers are really squared away cats and we like to hide stuff, how much electronics and wiring is hidden in that individual soldier that he's routed through all of his equipment. Most people just don't know it. That individual soldier on the left is probably carrying somewhere on the order of maybe 10, 15 feet of cabling that they're routing inside their load carriage system. Because it's ugly, it's out, if it hangs, if it breaks, I lose connectivity, those kind of things. So we're always looking at wireless. Now understanding, we have NSA protocols that when you talk about the data that's on that body and you're wirelessly hopping it, I need to be able to protect it so the enemy can't hack into it and see that as I'm looking at my heads-up display, I'm actually looking at the bad guy I'm about to blow up. That's an issue. Power, 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 power. We all want the Tony Stark chess piece. I'll volunteer for it tomorrow. The biggest driver that we have is power. I mean, when you talk about the load of the soldier, if bullets are good, batteries are great. Because when I can talk on a radio, I can have anybody shoot anybody from my radio system. My weapon's only good to 500 meters. My command and control platforms, power, 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 power. And you got to realize, you know, we're spoiled with this thing because we all walk around, and if you're a good user, whether you belong to that other company, Samsung, or whether you're an iPhone user, government iPhone, by the way, you're not anywhere without plugging in. Plugging in, plugging in, Soldier doesn't have that capability. I may ride in a platform to get to the space that I potentially could use for charging. When I end up in my forward operating area, I may end my day at a place where I can recharge. But on the outside, to have viable, long-term, sustainable power to support all my devices, that's gargantuan. When you talk about mission profile, normally it's 72 hours, traditionally. 48, 72. Special operations a little bit longer. That's because batteries that I have on the body, water and food I can carry on the body, and ammunition I can carry on the body. So standalone, when I walk out the door, that soldier that behind me that's wearing upwards of 120 pounds of external load, that's to live as a standalone platform for 3 days, no help from anybody. I can go wade into hell and steal the devil's pocket knife all by myself if I have to. I didn't realize I just said that. Please don't use that on television. But that's what you do when you step off the door. We get so wrapped around the ability and capability of this. I mean, we're not even talking about GPS capability. I mean, I got Army satellites. I can talk to God if I have to. But powering it is a whole nother animal. That's a huge piece that always happens with us. Multifunction materials. You know, when you talk about next generation, we've gotten away from, once again, I'll date myself, in the great red threat of Russia back in the day. We were worried about chem bio. First ground war in Iraq, we were worried about chem bio. Or now it's CBRNE, chem, bio, rad, nuke, environment. We don't even hardly talk about that anymore until somebody uses something. You know, I will tell you, the running joke as an infantryman, well, you know what my protective mask was for, my M42 protective mask? I know I got soldiers in here who'll agree with me. It was my pillow. I didn't want to put that thing on. Chem bio is scary. I've seen plenty of movies. I know how it works. I don't want any piece of that. You know, when you talk about a multifunctional material ensemble, or ensemble, as we like to say out in the Metro West, you know, that uniform that allows me to go through multiple environments. I mean, people don't have an appreciation that a soldier could, first off, a soldier can be anywhere in the world in 18 hours. Period, end of story, 18 hours. Just think about that for a minute. I can get a call at Fort Benning, Georgia, and I can be engaging an enemy somewhere within 18 hours. That's amazing. But I could be doing it in Afghanistan. I could be doing it in South America. We're not really going to have operations in South America. I'm purely using that as an example. Somebody last briefing, I said, is that where we're going next? No, stop. Stop, no, I'm not, no. You know, North Africa, Southern Africa, all the environments that we're in, you know, we talk about, most people don't know, A bags, B bags, C bags, D bags. When I step on an aircraft and I go anywhere in the world in 18 hours, I have 4 duffel bags filled with stuff. And that stuff is environmentally dependent of where I'm going to go. Light weather fatigues for a jungle environment. Heavy weather fatigues and extreme cold weather stuff for, you know, Alaska, for example. No, we're not going to go assault Alaska. But those kinds of things, above and beyond what I have on my body. Now, when you talk about the 4 duffel bags, how do we get them into the battle space? I put them on aircraft. What an aircraft does, it consumes fuel. I got to fly it. You know, most people have never heard of this. It's called the tooth to tail. The United States Army is a dragon. The infantryman is a tooth. That's 1/3 of our Army. The other 2/3 of the Army is a supply tail used to get that 1/3 anywhere in the world. People don't realize the logistics burden that's there. I can't even tell you how much fuel we burn getting deployed on military aircraft. The Air Force guys, you want to develop solar airplanes? You know, when you talk about vehicles that are on the ground, they don't roll without fuel, period. No such thing. You have no idea the burn rate of fuel we go through on the ground to run convoys. I'm using fuel in trucks to take water from point A to point B. I'm getting those convoys blown up to move water, hence JPADs. Remove the vehicles from the equation, fly in sustainment. That's a way to address that capability. We're always looking for new and novel ways to address the problems that we have. The other problem, money. Come up with a printing press and give me a budget, that'd be great. You know, how do we look at those things? And you have to understand we're constricted by numbers. You know, you and I can go out and spend $400 on an iPhone. Well, $600 on an iPhone. We can do that. When it comes to the American soldier, I have to buy in bulk. 1 million man strong. I don't buy a thing of anything. I use that in a generic way. The Department of the Army doesn't buy a thing in anything. We buy everything of one thing. Because not only do we have to put it on a soldier's back, we have to be able to sustain it, we have to be able to replace it, and it has to, I can't have a soldier sitting in the field going, I need another one of these, and somebody go, yeah, we're out of those. That's just not how we're built. Well, right now we're using photovoltaics for a lot of our green systems for our shelters because it's easy to use, for example, because our shelters are stationary and we can do that. Does that have the ability to tie into a microgrid inside a forward deployed area that I can use that power to do 3D printed food or potentially uniform construction? Maybe. The issue is for uniform construction, for example, I've got to be able to get that piece of equipment there. I have to be able to get the supply for it there, and then it's probably going to take somebody to operate it. So now I'm talking about creating a burden, because every soldier is an infantryman first and foremost, is how do I do that? You know, 3D printed food is a prime example. I have to get a 3D printer in an environment. You know, I can go to Barnes & Noble and buy a 3D printer for $300. I can gently bump it off my counter and break my $300 3D printer. You know, I tell the running joke all the time. Give a ranger 2 steel ball bearings, tell him to cross the road, and by the time he's gotten to the other side, he's lost one and he's broken the other one. That's how soldiers are on equipment. You know, another example I use all the time is uniform destruction. People probably are not aware of how we breach obstacles. So there's a triple standard concertina outside an enemy position, and we've got to get into that. Do you know how we do that? Anyone? Come on. Thank you. It's called a ballistic body breach. I grab the youngest member of my squad. I throw him on the triple standard concertina wire, and everybody runs across his back. But when you realize the environment that's there, it's not like I have a vehicle that I can get there. I have to breach. I can't sit there with wire snippers and cut it while people are shooting at me. We have to dynamically breach the obstacle. The battle dress uniform, now the operational camouflage pattern, body armor, load carriage, it was never designed to be thrown on triple standard concertina. It is now. When you talk about the ruggedization level that we have in equipment, I mean, thank God we're not the Navy, because they have salt water. Salt water's an animal. It destroys everything quicker than Rangers do. You know, when we have that capability for equipment. So, I mean, we struggle all the time because we have military-specific problems that it's very difficult to make other people understand. Our glasses, for goodness sake, that are created for our soldiers, you should see these things. They're ballistic eyewear that weigh 4.5, and they don't weigh 4.5 pounds, but they're big and ruggedized. They're made of a heavy, rigid plastic. I mean, they affectionately call them the birth control glasses. Because there's a reason you're not going to pick up any young lady wearing those glasses, or man for that matter. Because there's these big, hulky things. Because when you're bouncing around on the inside of platforms, when you're bouncing around on aircraft, when you're in a vehicle and you fall asleep and smash your nose, all those kinds of things. I mean, if you see an Army-issued pair of glasses, you know, everyone goes, oh, you over-engineer everything. It's because we have to. Just because of the environment that we operate in. You know, people talk about athletes. Soldiers are athletes on steroids. Figuratively, not literally. Another thing, somebody thought we pumped our soldiers full of HGH. We don't. If we did, I'd get back in the Army tomorrow because I could stand some. But you know, the rigors of an athlete, for example, and I'm an Ironman athlete, so that day ends at the end of 6, 7, 8, 9 hours and it's over. Soldier never stops. Environment never changes. They're in that extreme temperature, extreme cold. They're moving in it all the time. They're wearing the same uniform for multiple days or potentially weeks. They're using equipment time and time again. They're using equipment not what it's designed for. There's a reason why I got former soldiers in here. There's a reason why we went away from traditional metal spikes to put in shelter halves in the Army. It's because the old Pasket helmet, that's a great hammer. Tent spike, hammer. We designed a new helmet that gives greater level of protection, and the minute you smash your tent spike with it, you break the helmet. And soldiers went, but no, this is a hammer. No, young Jedi. This is a helmet. You know, that trade-off, and I use my father who just recently passed away, a retired sergeant major, who grew up with the old steel pots, for those of us that were in the Army. You know what soldiers used to do in steel pots? Used to shave in them. Used to shave in them. So my father, this command sergeant major, comes to the U.S. Army Natick Soldier Research Development and Engineering Center, the jewel of the Metro West Crown, located just down the Mash Pike, and gets the new helmet and goes, "Can I shave in it?" And the engineer goes, "No, Sergeant Major, you can't. It's multiple layers of Kevlar. If you soak it wet, it'll delaminate. It won't work anymore." And Sergeant Major DeGay goes, "Well, that thing's a piece of crap. But it'll protect your head, which is way more important." I mean, when you talk about our customer, it's just a different way of looking at things. And that's kind of the challenge that we have, sir. I will say that in the last probably decade, we've seen a huge change in procurement, contracting, and fielding. We've seen a huge change in PIPing, in product improvements. You know, used to be you got a piece of equipment and you wouldn't see an update to that piece of equipment for a couple years. We can't do that anymore. Not the least of which is we're driven by a young, in touch, in tune, technologically advanced soldier that says, "I don't like this on my Nike shoe," and I tweet to Nike and Nike says it sucks and they send me a new one and they change it to the next design problem or the next design system that they have come out. I have a pair of boots that stinks. Why can't I get that fixed? Darn interwebs. You know, we have a customer that is starting to think that way. Where in the past, you know, I've been talking to some of the old dog soldiers, to include myself. Hey, you got what you got, and that's what you got, and you just live with it. You know, those days are gone. First and foremost, the Army has changed as a whole when it comes to procurement. Secondly, the soldier has changed as a whole. They are more intelligent. And thirdly, the demand for the changes are more important. Look, folks, I don't know if you realize, but we've been at war since 2001. It's 2016. That piece of body armor that I fielded that went out the door in 2001 does not work in theater right now, period. It can't. So that environment creates change for us. And because of that, you're probably seeing either a PIP, a product improvement, or a change in design cycle anywhere from 18 to 36 months, which I understand, trust me, I understand in the private sector, that's long in the tooth and ancient. For Department of Defense, that's practically tomorrow. That's a huge change when we talk about that design. So as a whole, we're extremely happy. I mean, we have great partnerships with Program Executive Offices Soldiers, our Program Executive Office Soldier, which is, for lack of a better term, our contracting and maintaining organization, and they work back and forth with us all the time to find out what's new and emerging and what's fielding and what works and what doesn't work. So it's a huge change. Sir. Sure. Absolutely. So when it comes to body armor, load carriage helmets, it is what it is, what it is. I can't do anything for this. When it comes to all of the electronics, there are fail-safes in all of the electronics. So currently, the onus is on the individual to go through a process on the platform, whatever it may be, whether it's a smartphone, whether it's a piece of electronics on the body, that soldier renders that piece of equipment inoperable. If the individual soldier doesn't have the capability to do that, his or her squad mates or squad leader or platoon sergeant or platoon leader are supposed to do that. It's we call it Zing out of radios, for example, inside the Army. You may get the hull of the radio, but you can't get my frequencies and who I talk to. So will you walk away with the radio? Absolutely you can. Can you do anything with it? You can hold paper down with it, prop a door open with it. You can't talk to anybody. Could you reverse engineer it, given enough time? Maybe. I would like to think that in the time it takes you to reverse engineer a radio that we lost in the battle space of Afghanistan, that cave's probably been collapsed by a 3,000-pound bomb. I could be wrong. That's what I'd like to know. That being said, when we first went in the ground war in Afghanistan in 2001, we did find GPS devices that were taken off 3rd Ranger Battalion in Somalia. Non-functioning, didn't work, they couldn't use them, but the technology was there. The issue is always going to be there. For us, the goal as a whole for electronics is that you get the item, you can't talk, it won't do anything, and you can't talk to anybody. And that's the best that we can do. There are protocols for what we have for off-gassing or what for heating is in our batteries. None of our batteries are worn next to skin. They're worn out in all the load carriage, normally on the other side of the body armor. So if there is a heat signature, there's no detriment to the individual soldier. I could put you in touch with our power group to let you know what those numbers are, because I don't know. University of Georgia graduate, I got it, Tech. But you know, I can give you a better example, but that's how those are built for standoff.
This is really great. If we could give Dutch a big hand.
Thank you very much.
Urge me not to use moderation in a cause like the present. I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard.